Good morning.
Good morning.
Welcome to our service today. We are the Rogue Valley Unitarian Fellowship, or ROOF, in Ashland. My name is Francie Parr, and I'm a part of ROOF because, like all of us here, I'm a sinner. And ROOF welcomes me. We are so happy and welcome you to this service today, both online and in person. We want to especially thank the members of the stream team who are helping make the online service happen, and the members of the neighborhood team who welcome the on-site congregation. If you are a newcomer, we invite you to sign up for our mailing list on rvuuf.com. rvuuf.org. You will receive a weekly email that gives you all the information you need to make your decision about whether you'd like to join us on Sunday morning on site or online. You will also learn about other great things going on here at ROOF. We are so glad to have you with us for this service, and we invite you to join us in our mission: embracing diversity, empowering connection, and engaging in the work. We begin each service by acknowledging that our building is built on land that began as the home of the Cow Creek, Umpqua, Takelma, Shasta, and Lagawa people. We remind ourselves that Indigenous people are part of our communities and continue to experience the effects of colonization. We are committed to fighting for the worth and dignity of Indigenous people, both in our community and around the world. We are also committed to work for a world in which the lives, the work, the bodies, the dreams, and leadership of Black people are honored and respected. We do all this by putting our words, values, and principles into action every day for justice and the common good. These services are a part of that work. Welcome, and thank you for being with us.
Good morning. Good morning. I'm Julie Crooks, the music director here at ROOF. And for those of you who might be new and maybe guests today, you would ordinarily see Reverend Sean, our minister, up here, but as is customary in many UU churches, we sometimes have something different. And we have music services about 3 or 4, oh, hello, he's waving, to us 3 or 4 times a year. Today we're going to talk about sin. Where did that come from? Why is it important? And how does that concept of sin apply to us as UUs? At this point, we have an announcement that we want to make. Yes?
I'm Jan Wade. I'm part of the Building Aesthetics and Grounds Committee, and we have a semi-annual cleanup day, semi-annually, and that is coming up May 11th. We work doing general housework from 9:30 to 11:30. Then we have lunch together, and the sign-up sheet is in the back, and I'll be standing back there where you can pick out a task for yourself. Thank you.
We come together this morning as people have come to church for decades. We come to worship the holy, to seek understanding, to honor knowledge, to garner wisdom, to live by, to find a sustenance for our faith. We come here to give being to our identity as religious persons. Religious persons who dare to take the risks to find out about ourselves, who we are, and what we want. Religious persons willing to assume responsibility for the direction of our lives. Religious persons seeking freedom from compulsion and freedom to become ourselves in a resisting world. Religious persons with beliefs that will make a difference in this world.
Please join me in our opening song this morning. We're going to sing in the Great Hymnal number 361, Enter, Rejoice, and Come In, and we're going to take it at quite a clip.
Enter, rejoice, and come in. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in. Open your ears to the song. Open your ears to the song. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in.
Two more.
Open your hearts, everyone. Open your hearts, everyone. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in.
One more.
Don't be afraid of some change. Don't be afraid of some change. Today will be a joyful day. Enter, rejoice, and come in.
Good morning. I'm Roger Howe, and with me today is Bill Montfort, and we're here to light the anti-racism candle. Pardon me. The white supremacy culture is a term used to encompass a diverse set of institutional practices and assumptions, often operating unconsciously, that work to benefit white people and do not benefit people of color. Some of these are institutional, such as laws, welfare rules, and mortgage practices that seem to operate below the level of awareness of the people involved. Others are mechanisms of discernment built into all of us that help us to divide the world into good and bad people, people to be trusted or not to be trusted. These too operate beneath our awareness, skewing our view of the world and the people around us, making us feel uncomfortable in the presence of people we unconsciously expect to be unreliable or dangerous. The term white supremacist conjures up images of people in hoods, mobs, and lynchings. But it doesn't take those people to perpetuate a white supremacy culture. It only takes people who are willing to believe, without examining it carefully, that everything is okay, who are willing to think because none of our friends is being harassed by the police or followed around department stores, that it isn't happening to anyone. The anti-racism group is dedicated to understanding how those things live in us and move us. We invite you to join us.
Thank you, Roger. It has become our practice to light a candle each week for peace. We pray for the power to be gentle, the strength to be forgiving, the patience to be understanding, the endurance to accept the consequences of holding on to what we believe to be right. May we put our trust in the power of good to overcome evil and the power of love to overcome hatred. Amen, Ashe, and blessed be.
Peace, salam, shalom. Peace, salam, shalom. Peace, salam, shalom. Peace, salam, shalom.
So now is the time for storytelling. So if there are any children out there or big people who would like to come down, I can't show you any pictures because this is a story that originated from someone called Cynthia Johnson, and I have adapted it for today. So you're welcome to stay in your seats if you like, or you can come to the front. You'll actually make me feel less silly if there's somebody sitting there. Yep, big kids. Big kids. There's no such thing as old. So this actually requires participation by everybody, not just this group here. And I'm going to cue you every time that I need you to respond back to me. And this is what you're going to say. Just to make things interesting. So here's a trial.
Just to make things interesting.
Perfect. Okay. So the story goes like this. People in every land have wondered how the world began and why the world is the way it is. People in every land have wondered how the world came to have a mixture of sadness and happiness, why there is both joy and sorrow. Many of the stories imagine that at the beginning of the world, everything was perfect. That there was no sadness, no meanness, no worry. Many of the stories tell of that perfect time, and then what happened, and who did what, and who we should blame, etc. The people who made up the stories and told them again and again were religious people. People who were doing exactly the same thing that we're doing today. They were looking for what their hearts and minds and experiences told them was true. Good stories don't just stay with facts we can check out. They are often filtered through our imaginations that let us think what might have been. This morning, I'll be talking to your parents about sin from a Unitarian Universalist perspective. I read lots of creation stories as I looked for a way to talk to children this morning and about how bad things come to be in the world. This story is about the beginning of our world, a story that is a little bit different, but my imagination tells me might have happened long ago. Once upon a time, long, long ago, there was a creator who had a hobby of creating planets. The creator took pride in making each one different. One day, she looked at a gap in the solar system and said, I think I'll make a planet to go there. Let me think. What will I make this one be like? She sat and looked out into the vast reaches of swirling matter and thought long and hard about creating another planet in her collection. Now, how she made planets was quite interesting. She had a very large closet, I can relate to that, in which she had rows and rows of shelves, little jars and boxes and envelopes of things. She took a large glass jar down from the shelf and she started adding ingredients to her planet. A pinch of this, a pinch of that. In went daffodils and puppies and pizza. She added ladybugs and butterflies and fire ants. She poured in lots of liquid from a jar marked oceans and seas, and from the jar marked clear lakes, and slowly poured in more liquid from a jar called waterfalls. She smiled and added a dash from a jar called mud puddles.
Just to make things interesting.
She decided to shake in a sample from all of her boxes labeled human beings.
Just to make things interesting.
She combined people of all sizes and shapes and ages, many colors of skin and colors of hair, many different kinds of noses, and many different interests and skills. All over the people, she sprinkled some powder called change, so that people would change in size and age and interests and skills.
Just to make things interesting.
She mused to herself, I'm glad I thought to do this. She looked in the section of her closet called Moods and Emotions, and she wondered whether she should add a little or a lot. She started with love, adding more than 2 cups. And then,
just to make things interesting,
she closed her eyes and reached in and took a handful from the miscellaneous jar, where there were bits and pieces of sadness and courage and loneliness and happiness and memory and hope. She shook out some schools and universities where people could come together to learn. She shook out some churches and temples so that people could come together to remember what was important in life. She added comfortable shoes and pointy-toed high-heeled ones and blue jeans and warm coats and bathing suits. From her section called Smells, she shook in a pinch of hyacinths, a pinch of just-baked chocolate chip cookies, and a pinch of freshly mowed grass, and
just to make things interesting,
a little pinch of skunk. She amused herself for days and days designing her new planet. Finally, she was almost done. There was one more ingredient she wanted to add. She moved jars around looking for one special jar she remembered that she had but she never used before. Finally, she found it behind a jar called Kalamavda, which she didn't add because she forgot what that was. She carefully lifted down a little jar labeled Freedom. This time, she had to read the label because she didn't remember exactly what was in the jar. The label read, "This compound contains the ability to make choices, to choose one thing instead of another thing. Use cautiously because the choices made will have consequences." The creator smiled as she measured out twice the maximum recommended dosage into her glass jar, and as she did, she said to herself,
just to make things interesting.
She held the jar in her hands, slowly turning it as she looked down into the open jar. A soft chuckle rumbled out of her mouth and into the jar. A tear trickled down her cheek into the jar. She leaned over the jar and blew her warm breath into it. And then she put a cover on the glass jar and flung it away into the star-speckled darkness. It landed just where she intended, about 93 million miles from her favorite sun. The creator watched her planet settle into its new home. She thought to herself, I did a good job on that planet. I hope they'll like all the special things I did.
Just to make things interesting.
And then, She sat down with a good book, a bowl of popcorn, and had some kalamavda. Just to make things interesting. Thank you. So,
Minds be open to new learning. May your lips bring truth into the world. May your hearts know love. Your hands do the work of justice. As you go your way in peace. As you go your way in peace.
well, I bet you never expected to hear that in a UU church, huh? No, UUs are not too big on the concept of sin, original or otherwise. This became blatantly obvious to me when I was looking to find hymns for this topic and came up with a really short list. But, like many UUs, I was raised in another religious culture, and sin was a very large part of that and how I was brought up. And I thought it might be interesting to look at it from a UU perspective. But let me back up a bit and get clear on what exactly sin means. The word sin is a term that means different things to different cultures and religions. Although there are differences in denominations, when Christians use the word sin, they refer either to a state of being in sin or to actual sins, that people commit. Being in sin, or more specifically, being in the state of original sin, is a direct result of our being descendants of those original sinners, Adam and Eve. In Christian belief, because we are born in this flawed state, we are open to the power of evil and can only be saved from it by the divine grace of God through baptism. After baptism, however, original sin is no longer applicable, and you can only be a sinner if you commit actual sins. As far as I recall as a kid, we all committed sins, of course, so that brings us back pretty much to square one, being a sinner. We were emphatically reminded of this each Sunday and given an opportunity to fix it by being truly sorry, called repenting. As some of you may know, and some of you former Catholics are probably now wincing, Catholics are very specific about sin, much more so than other Christian denominations. For Catholics, sin is evaluated by its gravity, and all sins are divided into either mortal sins or venial sins. Mortal sin, as described by the Catholic Catechism, is any sin which destroys charity at the heart of man by a grave violation of God's law. Venial sin is one that allows charity to subsist even though it offends and wounds it. As a former Lutheran, these concepts were a little too obtuse for me to grasp, so let me explain further. For a sin to be a mortal one, it has to meet 3 criteria. It has to be against one of the 10 commandments, more on that later, and it has to be committed with full knowledge and complete consent. Venial sin is not so serious. It too can be against the moral law of the commandments, but without full knowledge or complete consent. I might add here that sin can be committed in your mind as well as by action. Coveting or lusting in your mind is an immoral act. So that would be a venial sin, but actually committing the activity with full knowledge and consent would put it into the mortal sin category. The important point about venial sin is the belief that without repenting for each one, you can start the slide down that slippery slope into mortal sin. In a nutshell, mortal sin puts a permanent stain on your soul, or in Harry Potter terms, fractures your soul. A venial sin just tarnishes your virtue. For Jews, sin is not a state of being, but an action in contradiction to God's commandments. One Hebrew word for sin, chet, illustrates this very well. The word is a term for archery, meaning to miss the mark. God gives us a clear target for our behavior, a target that we might miss. For Jews, people are neither fundamentally good nor evil, but have both the inclination to do good and the inclination to do evil, constantly battling within them. In Christianity, man sins because he is a sinner. In Judaism, man is a sinner because he sins. Obviously, to keep yourself out of trouble in either of the Abrahamic traditions, Judaism or Christianity, you have to be pretty clear on the 10 Commandments. I'm curious just how many of you grew up learning the 10 Commandments? Oh, big crowd. I don't know about you, but those first ones were pretty easy, right? Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not commit adultery, thou shalt not steal, honor your father and mother. But then they started to make a lot less sense to me with the coveting and false witnessing and all that stuff at the end, like the kitchen sink, the ones with the neighbors' cows and manservants and maidservants and asses and oxes and cows and whatever. It was just like too much information to remember, and the commandments were like this long each. Good on concept, bad on delivery. So what is the point of all that? What were our religious forefathers trying to get across to us? And isn't it interesting that most major religions each have a version of the same thing? If you compare Catholic, Protestant, and Hebrew commandments, there is very little difference except the order. None of the religions add anything extra, nor do they leave anything out of the 10. And although the Quran does not have commandments per se, phrases throughout the Quran compare almost verse for verse with the 10 Commandments. So we could go on for days literally discussing sin and its definitions according to the Muslim, Jewish, and Christian traditions, but honestly that would be simply intellectual, since UUs don't accept the concept of original sin, nor do we feel the need to confess our mental or physical transgressions to others for forgiveness. Personally, I think UUs can relate more to the concept of the 7 deadly sins. Contrary to what you might think, these did not originate in the Bible. Rather, the listing of human transgressions was first found in the 4th century, with Gregory the Great formulating the traditional 7, ranking them by severity in the 6th century: pride, envy, anger, sloth, gluttony, and lust. That pretty much covers any crime, vice, or immoral act. There were really 7, I just used 6 fingers. Personally, I think we need to add to that list. As people of conscience, UUs continue to identify a number of other things that were not even considered at earlier times. What about disrespecting, demeaning, or marginalizing others? Don't we believe that those are a sin? No matter how fun and catchy, our next piece shows you just how many ways we can go wrong. That's a Jamaican tune. Yep, gossiping is certainly bad, and maybe even a sin, but also a broad generalization of women being the gossipers, with the male voices written to do the singing about the female wives being the gossip. I couldn't figure out where any of that fit into the commandments or the deadly sins, but we sure have some strong feelings about how wrong all of that is. Psychologists tell you that the human mind responds more quickly to positive language than to negative, which requires double processing. Wouldn't it have been much easier to learn right from wrong at church if we had simply been told, respect everyone and everything? That would have covered it. Every time one of those sinful thoughts came into our minds, we could simply ask ourselves, is that respectful of fill in the blank? Unfortunately, rational thought doesn't always come into play when we are tempted or overcome with a desire for something. And that leads us to evil and the devil. Oh dear, again, we could go on for days on that topic, but let's leave out all the obvious hooey and get right to the bottom line. Most of us believe that there is such a thing as evil, and unfortunately, we have seen it sometimes in our lives, past or present. It resides in each of us, although most of us are able to keep it at bay most days, usually getting better at it as we get older. As I explain to my children, it's that nasty little thing in you that says, I want what I want, and I want it now. Kind of a cookie monster of the soul. Sigmund Freud called it the id, the part of us that is the basis of all internal desire and the need to satisfy those desires as quickly as possible. Let's stop here and do some singing about giving in. This being church and all, the point of this tune is to give into positive impulses. Please rise in body or spirit and join us in hymn number 1024 in your teal hymnal. Actually, if you don't want to use your hymnal, I'll call out the words to you.
You gotta do what the Spirit says do. You gotta do what the Spirit says do. When the Spirit says do, you gotta do. Oh Lord, you gotta do what the Spirit says do. 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 Sing! Sing,
was fun. I thought about putting in some extra verses, but eating chocolate didn't fit into the rhythm. So as we heard in this song, when your spirit says do, you gotta do, right? Well, no. If we have successfully maneuvered past the stage of a 3-year-old and arrived at something close to adulthood, the devil is more than a figurative way of describing a compulsive reaction. There is something truly demonic about being inwardly subjected to the urges of an organism that is programmed to survive. Sometimes, no matter how sincerely and passionately we do want to do good, we keep doing the opposite. We can declare our most deeply held values only to find ourselves betraying them. And in our very worst hours, the struggle to resist temptation is like the struggle to resist the pull of the tide. In popular mythology, the devil is a way of talking about that which blocks our path in life, frustrates us, our aspirations, makes us stuck or obstructed. While the Hebrew Satan means adversary, the Greek diabolos means one who moves something across the path. In Buddhist tradition, the devil is called Mara, which in Sanskrit means the killer. In his book, Living with the Devil, A Meditation on Good and Evil, Stephen Batchelor relates many of the historic tales of Buddha and his interactions with Mara. Their journeys together illustrate how Buddha identifies the armies under Mara's command as sensual desire, discontent, hunger and thirst, craving, lethargy, fear, doubt, restlessness, longing for gain, praise, honor, and fame, and extolling oneself while disparaging others. The Buddha Gautama tells how he struggled to be free from these forces while they seemed to besiege and attack him, blur his vision, darkening his understanding, and divert him from his goal of complete freedom or enlightenment. It was not until Buddha was able to experience these desires and fears as nothing but impersonal and ephemeral conditions of mind and body was he able to dismiss them. As soon as he was able to stop compulsively identifying the thoughts and feelings that arose in him as me or mine, Mara, the devil, no longer had any influence over him. Now, most of us are not as disciplined or as insightful as the Buddha Gautama, but we can still appreciate how the Buddhist path of rightful living could help us figure out what is good behavior. The concepts of right motive, right speech, right acts, right livelihood, right effort, and right concentration or mind development are remarkably like the commandments and can lead us along the path of self-deliverance. Cease to do evil, learn to do good, cleanse your own heart. This is the teaching of the Buddhas. Whether you believe in God or karma, both share a view that hidden powers are at work while we face the daunting task of redeeming ourselves for the remainder of eternity. You can mentally substitute the word enlightenment for salvation and the words harmonious or appropriate for right or perfect or forgiven. It sometimes still comes out the same. Being saved, being good, being righteous, being without sin is still our own decision, act by act, thought by thought, and a whole lot of work. Whether or not you choose to ask for help from God or a great spirit, from the universe, from cosmic energy, or simply from your own conscience, understand that this is a lifelong journey. Personally, I'm willing to ask for a little help. And speaking of asking for help, each week we take an offering to support the mission and work of our congregation. Your generosity each provides the vast majority of the financial support of the programs, services, outreach, and staffing of our congregation. Your giving is immediately put to work here, putting our principles into action in our community and beyond. If you are joining online, well, they're not today, but for those of you who prefer to do things online instead of a check, actually a check you could mail to 87th 4th Street, Ashland, 97520. You can also use your phone to go to tinyurl.com/roofoffering and follow the instructions there. Or you can text $$ and the amount you'd like to donate to 541-229-4229. If you need support, please contact Reverend Sean using the form on roof.org. We will do our best to help. We will now gratefully receive the morning offering. you. The morning offering is now gratefully received. Thank you for all these gifts that you bring to the congregation. So, when you came in today, did you wonder what other UUs think about sin? Is sin a bad thing? Is it a good thing? Well, as any good UU would, I have several opinions. Yes, certainly committing what we have identified as sin would be bad. Bad for your psyche and your soul, and bad for the part of your world that you do those things to. But if you look at sins in the Buddhist view as simply obstacles placed periodically in your path for enlightenment, they can be a good thing. Opportunities to grow, to work harder at being kind and respecting all things, and a chance to recognize the true root of whatever evil has popped up, to acknowledge it and let it pass without attaching to you. So after services, as we go out into the world again, let us remember, as Professor Dumbledore cautioned Harry Potter, the time will come soon enough when we must make the choice between what is easy and what is right. Let's not be afraid to ask for help along the path. Please join me in our closing song, number 348, in your gray hymnal, Guide My Feet. Thank you. Please rise in body or spirit and join me. What number did I say? 348? Thank you. Well, memory lapse there. The Reverend Tony Larson writes this: "My friends, not everyone can be a Unitarian Universalist. Not everyone should be a Unitarian Universalist, because the first criterion for getting into this church is you've got to know how to sin. That's very important to us, and not everyone knows how to do it." These are his words. We don't want people here, we don't want people here who never do wicked things. We don't want people who have holier than thee or thou. We don't want people who have made it into the salvation department and are just waiting around to get picked up. Because people with too much heaven in them are hell to live with. Now, don't get me wrong, if there were any perfect human beings around, we might let them in, but since there aren't any, anyone who claims he, she, they doesn't do wicked things is either trying to fool others or trying to fool themselves. It is the nature of the human to be evil as well as good. And you should not be a Unitarian Universalist if you are not willing to admit that about yourself. As a matter of fact, recognition of your own evil has great power for mobilizing compassion with understanding instead of judgment. Jodi Pilcoe, the author of Plain Truth, writes in her story about the Amish, "The English judged a person so that they'd be justified in casting her out. The Amish judged a person so that they'd be justified in welcoming her back." Where I'm from, if someone is accused of sinning, it's not so that others can place blame. It's so that the person can make amends and move on. May we be that wise about others as well as about ourselves. The choir's last piece is just for fun. Please remain seated, and after that we will, let's see, sing ourselves? No, we won't. So the choir is going to sing, remain seated, and then we'll all sing together. Well, a song you know. They work really hard.